Welcome to Real Clear Politics on SiriusXM's POTUS.
Welcome to Real Clear Politics on SiriusXM for Monday, January 27th. I'm Andrew Walworth, and I'm joined by RCP President and co-founder Tom Bevan and White House correspondent Phil Wegman. Well, gentlemen, there are several confirmation hearings this week for Trump's cabinet positions. On Wednesday, Robert F. Kennedy is set to appear before the Senate Finance Committee, and then on Thursday, he goes before the Health and Human Services Committee. We also have Thursday, Kash Patel, Trump's pick for the director of the FBI. He's going to be in front of the Judiciary Committee. And on Thursday, we have Tulsi Gabbard's hearings before the Intelligence Committee. She's Trump's pick for director of national intelligence. So, Tom, it's kind of a festival this week. Which of these will you be watching most carefully, and who do you think is the hardest lift?
Well, this is definitely gauntlet week for Republicans in the Senate and the Trump administration in terms of these are the nominees that are going to be the toughest. I think probably if I had to rank them, I would say Tulsi Gabbard is probably going to be the toughest. Just because, again, we talked about this before, with Hegseth, and Phil had mentioned this on a previous program, the way that he was treated, I think made it easy for Republicans to fall in line and say, look, we're going to, he's a conservative, he's a Republican. Tulsi Gabbard she was a Democrat and then became an independent. And while she is in MAGA world and in the orbit, and certainly there are plenty of people within that sphere who love her, I'm not sure how much loyalty and depth of relationships she has with Republican senators. And so that might make it easier for them to, not vote for her confirmation. And again, with the margins in the Senate, she can only lose 3, and that one's going to be tough. RFK Jr. is an interesting case because he's also Democrat, and same kind of deal. And Kash Patel, even though he might have he's gotten some press as being controversial, he kind of, in my opinion, falls into that category as Pete Hegseth. He's a conservative, he's a MAGA warrior. And he's one of those folks that Republicans should, I think, fall in line and vote for him. It might be close, but I think he's probably going to get through. So I would rank for Tulsi number 1 in terms of vulnerability, RFK Jr. number 2, and Kash Patel number 3.
Phil, you see it that way?
I think so. I might put RFK Jr. at the top of that list, but all of Tom's points are taken. I think what we saw with Pete Hegseth is that he was the first into the lion's den, and the White House officials who I was talking to during that confirmation process were delighted because what they saw from Democrats was a general unpreparedness. In their mind, yes, there were all sorts of controversial topics put to Hegseth. He was pushed on a number of them, but it didn't seem that there was sort of a team memo for Democrats. Their questioning didn't build upon itself. And at the end, yeah, there were some viral clips and some moments where Democrats got their licks in, but they didn't lay a glove on him enough so that they got Republicans to defect. And they were expecting Murkowski and Collins to jump ship. They always saw those two as sort of a question mark. Now McConnell has sort of gone his own way, and that's not a problem because the arithmetic is such that Republicans, if 50 of them stick together, then they'll get the cabinet that the president wants, because this administration, they don't mind sending Vice President Vance to the Hill to cast the tie-breaking vote. They just want the president's people. And so this week is going to be pretty significant because a number of Democrats, folks that Trump sees as being critical to the realignment, they're on deck.
Yeah.
I want to ask Phil, if I could jump in, Andy,
sure.
What's the story with McConnell? Like, what was he, what's the rationale for him voting against Hegseth, other than just to kind of stick it to Trump on his, I was going to say way out the door, not necessarily, but I mean, that seems, I didn't expect that, but I guess other people did.
I mean, the stated reason wasn't just about some of these allegations of Hegseth. We saw the former majority leader actually steer clear of those. Instead, he raised concerns about whether or not Hegseth was qualified to lead such a sprawling bureaucracy. And one of the things that he noted, which was particularly interesting, and I think sort of a tell here as the Republican Party moves away from its previous neoconservative hawkishness, is that McConnell questioned whether or not Hegseth would be able to work with the military industrial base in this country. It's there in the press release that McConnell put out. And it shows that he has gone his own way. What's that old John Boehner quote? He says that a leader without a following is just a man out for a walk. Well, right now, it certainly seems that that is the former
Mitch McConnell's a man
leader.
out for a walk.
Right. Just to go back to Kennedy for a second, because I think I'm with Phil on this. I think that's the hardest lift. The Wall Street Journal came out with a very strong editorial this morning against him, called him a danger, I think it was. But Phil, how will the Democrats go after Kennedy? I mean, is it a character thing because of his past drug use and all that sort of thing? Or is it a competency thing? Or is it the crazy factor that he's just has positions that are not mainstream when it comes to things like vaccines?
I think it is all of the above, but Democrats need to tread carefully here because at a moment that they are appealing to authority to say, look at RFK Jr., and then look at all of these very credentialed experts who are telling you just how dangerous he is, that doesn't work post-COVID. It doesn't work when trust in institutions is at an all-time low. And so I think that what we're going to instead see is in RFK Jr., you have someone who has been widely published on the topic of vaccines. Certainly, there's a lot of criticism of him too, but he's able to defend his position. And so I think that we're going to have a back and forth between RFK Jr. and Democrats, and it'll be a bit of a referendum on this topic. But look, Democrats know that they can't sink a single nominee. They have to convince Republicans to jump ship and do that for them. And so the reason why I think RFK Jr. is perhaps a little at risk here is, like Tom said, he's a former Democrat. And what does this aspiring HHS secretary have in his background? He was a very pro-abortion Democrat. And so I would not be surprised if some of these Senate Republicans say, wait a minute, I'm with the president normally 100% of the time, but this guy is not aligned with the anti-abortion, pro-life message of this administration. I'm not going to do that. And of note, I think a lot of people have snickered at former Vice President Pence leading this charge against RFK Jr. But on the principle of it, that is a conversation that I think some Republicans are open to having that conversation. So he's getting it from the left and the right.
Well, I would say too, look, Tulsi Gabbard's pro-choice, and Democrats have had no problem. I mean, they ran RFK Jr. out of the party. I mean, they have absolutely, pilloried this guy all throughout the campaign, and they've done the same thing to Tulsi Gabbard, called her a Russian agent. I mean, so I think Democrats, with the exception of maybe Fetterman and one or two others who might, who just are of the opinion, look, I may not like this person, I may not agree with them, but the president deserves to get their nominee. That's who he chose, and it's his prerogative. Those one or two Democrats who might vote on that alone could make a difference because, as Phil said, there are plenty of Republicans, I think, who are going to be wavering on this, are going to have a tougher choice before them than they did with Pete Hegseth.
Yeah. Two things to that point. 7 Democrats voted for Kristi Noem, whose stated position is that she wanted this job at DHS because immigration enforcement was going to be the president's top agenda item. That tells you something. If 7 of them are willing to break ranks. And the other thing is Meghan McCain is going to be on the Hill for Tulsi Gabbard, and I would not want to be on Meghan McCain's bad side. So she'll be a surrogate for the DNI nominee.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned Pete Hegseth, Tom. He was appointed last week. We know that. There were 3 executive orders signed about the military today by Trump. They banned transgender service members from serving in the U.S. Armed Forces. They provided back pay to service members who were discharged for refusing COVID vaccinations, and they ended DEI programs. What do you make of today's executive actions?
All promises made during the campaign. Nothing surprising about that. You know, are some of them controversial? I mean, Trump banned the transgender folks in 2017. Biden reversed that order when he got into office. So this is kind of just a ping pong situation. To me, and the DEI stuff, I mean, Pete Hegseth, you know, you knew he was going to do that. To me, the most significant one is the reinstatement of folks who in the military who were ousted because of their unwillingness to take the vaccine. They're going to get back pay and rank, and that to me is that's righting a wrong. And I think most people have come to understand that now. The mandates that were put on people during COVID, you know, looking back in the rearview mirror, many of those were unjustified. People lost their livelihoods, and so it's good that the military, I think, is taking this step. And again, it's a promise that was, you know, Trump made during the campaign.
Okay, well, we're going to take a quick break, guys. We'll be right back after this. You're listening to Real Clear Politics on Sirius XM. I'm Andrew Walworth. I'm here with Phil Wegman and Tom Bevan. Don't go away. We'll be back right after this.
It's real, it's clear, and it's on POTUS.
It's Real Clear Politics.
Sirius XM 124.
Covering the news fairly and honestly.
You're listening to Real Clear Politics on Sirius XM's POTUS, Channel 124.
Welcome back to Real Clear Politics on Sirius XM. I'm Andrew Walworth. I'm here with Tom Bevan and Phil Wegman. And guys, over the weekend, Donald Trump and the president of Colombia got into a social media spat that escalated into threats of tariffs from both countries. This was all precipitated by Trump sending 2 military planes loaded with about 160 deported migrants back to Colombia. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt said on Sunday night that the government of Colombia has agreed to all of President Trump's terms. So the question is, Tom, what message does this send to the rest of the world about how Trump is approaching deportation?
I mean, I think it sends an incredibly powerful message. I mean, this was a fight that happened and was literally over almost before it happened. I mean, the Colombians threw in the towel. I mean, it was that quick. It took about 25 minutes or something from, you know, the president was you know, his response was overwhelming in terms of force, and I think the Colombians were caught off guard by his response, and basically they capitulated. And Carolyn Levin put that statement out. The president of Colombia actually retweeted it or reposted it, and I guess is what you say on X now, just sort of further solidifying the fact that, you know, he wanted everyone to know that everything's fine. They've come to an agreement, which was basically all of, you know, Trump's demands. And so, look, this sends a huge message to the rest of the world, the rest of the people in the hemisphere, particularly as it relates to immigration. We've seen some of this with Mexico. You know, there are other countries, Guatemala, Honduras, where a lot of the, you know, these illegal migrants have come from, gang members, etc. Venezuela. I think it sends a very powerful message. Look, the United States is enforcing its immigration laws, and you better get on board, or there's going to be a real price to pay. And that message was sent loud and clear.
Yeah, you know, Phil, I mean, the coverage you saw of this, even Trump's critics sort of had to say, oh, see, this is classic Trump negotiating style, this, you know, big stick, and then you sit back and you wait and see what the other guy does. It did seem like Trump, like classic Trump diplomacy, done over social media, done quickly. But I do think it seemed pretty well coordinated as well. And you compare this to sort of the opening days of the first Trump administration. This seemed like, you know, I mean, the State Department was on board. The whole thing sort of was done with sort of military precision.
I was talking to a Republican over the weekend who pointed to this decision as well as all of the other rollouts and said, you can't be surprised by Donald Trump's initial days in the White House because he's doing exactly what he said he would do. The way that this administration likes to phrase it is promises made, promises kept. But yeah, the rollout has been efficient. And I think that the difference here is, again, you know, this time around, Trump doesn't have a convert at state. He doesn't have someone like Rex Tillerson, who got on board and said he has Marco Rubio, and just go down the list when it comes to any of these cabinet nominees. They're true believers. So he has united his administration around what it is that he wants to do, and has the people around him to help him do that. I think that they were more than happy with this back and forth with Colombia, because they hope that this episode will be indelible in the minds of everyone in Mexico and in Panama and everyone else within this new sphere of American influence that they're trying to carve out from Greenland to Panama, the entire Western Hemisphere. They're saying Donald Trump means what he says, and this time around he's really going to push you, and they hope that other world leaders fold as quickly as the Colombians did.
As Scott Jennings said on CNN the other night, which I got a chuckle at, he said, this is the FAFO phase of the Trump presidency. And if you don't know what that stands for, look it up.
The other thing that happened over the weekend in terms of immigration were these raids. They were conducted in cities all over the country. Tom Homan called it the beginning stages of Trump's deportation effort. I said it has made 956 arrests on Sunday. It brings the total since Trump took office to about 2,700, I believe. Tom, broadly popular during the campaign. Is this what people expected? And do you think that they might run out of goodwill on this? So, I mean, if they move to deport, families and that sort of thing, are they going to?
Maybe, but we're a long way from that, Andy. I mean, this is just the getting started, and you see these stories in the media. People are terrified and they're scared and they're all these things. Selena Gomez was on Twitter, I think, posted this clip of herself just sobbing hysterically about, what they're doing to the people. And it's like, well, basically, so far, all ICE has done is arrest people who have committed crimes, in addition to the crimes that they committed coming into the country. But these are people who have committed felonies. There is going to be plenty of goodwill so long as that continues. And right. Then, which is up to, somewhere between 700,000, 800,000, even up to 1 million people. It's going to take ICE a while to find all those folks. And to the extent they continue to do that and keep a counter and keep releasing details, this person was a, sex offender, and this person, murdered someone, and this person, I think the public is going to be perfectly happy and satisfied with that. When it gets to, a situation where they are, getting people who may not have committed crimes or overstayed visas, but haven't, that's going to get a little bit touchy for the administration. But again, we're a long, long way from that.
Well, are we though, really? Because there aren't millions of criminal offenders among the immigrants that are here. I mean, the number, Axios had a really
you're sounding a little like the Cato Institute there, Andy.
Well, no, let me just say what Axios reported, and then you can tell me if Axios is wrong. They said there were about 1.8 million cases in immigration courts in the past year. Only about 8,500 were for crimes that were not related to entering the country illegally. And so if we're at almost 3,000 so far, it just seems to me that at some point those lines are going to cross, and they are going to. I mean, I haven't seen it yet, but someone's going to have that story. It's going to run on CNN or CBS, and it's going to be some totally innocent person who really was caught up in one of these raids and got put on a plane. Phil, I'm just wondering what happens when that happens.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. So in our conversations with Tom Homan before he was border czar, he said, he pointed to some of these drug dealers, members of the cartel, and obviously this administration has said for some time that they're going to start with them first. They've been very cognizant of the optics here. The images that were released were of, lines of, working age men handcuffed walking to a military plane. That was deliberate. But to your point, Andy, it's not just hardened criminals. There are others here illegally for economic reasons. And in my conversation with Homan, he said, if you are someone who has made an asylum claim and that claim has been rejected by a court, then you got due process, and now it is time for you to leave. And in our conversations with him, and what he has said subsequently is that no one is off the table. So I think that what we see from this White House is that they are trying to maintain that delicate balance where 2/3 of the country is fine with deporting criminals and illegal aliens. And so they're trying to make the most of that goodwill, knowing full well that eventually it will be someone who, yes, is here illegally and has broken the law, but for economic reasons. And they know, having lived through the family separation saga during the first administration, that public opinion can change very quickly on this. In fact, Vice President Vance, in a sit-down interview that he did with Tucker Carlson before the election, said that this was going to be the main thing to watch for as they begin, because he said, look, you're going to have media make arguments and really tug on heartstrings and try and, paint us as monsters. Well, that's something that they're on guard for currently.
Tom, are you worried that they'll be painted as monsters, or do you think this is going to be as popular as it seems to be or was during the campaign?
There's no question they're going to be painted as monsters. There's already articles doing just that, and folks on the, Democrats and folks on the left that are already making those claims. Again, I think the public's going to be fine with it as long as ICE continues to demonstrate that they are taking people out of the country who have committed crimes. When you get to a point where, in addition to coming into the country illegally, which is a crime, but when you get to a point where that's the only crime they've committed, yeah, then you're immediately into a gray area where the public, to Phil's point, much less, support for that. Much less support of, using the military and other assets to try and, secure the border, et cetera. So the administration is going to get there. The question is, when does it happen? How long does it take? And what does it look like when they do get there? And I continue to believe, if they remove 10,000 folks a week, right? That's 500,000 in a year. And if the number is closer to, 1 million, that's basically almost 2 years that ICE has before they'll run out of people who again, have committed additional crimes since before they came to the country or since they got here.
All right, well, guys, we're going to take a quick break. You're listening to Real Clear Politics on Sirius XM. I'm Andrew Walworth. I'm here with Tom Bevan and Phil Wegman. Don't go away.
Online at RealClearPolitics.com.
On air on Sirius XM Channel 124.
Real Clear Politics is on POTUS. Not bound by any left-right constructs.
Real Clear Politics. Open to a wide political spectrum.
This is POTUS on Sirius XM Channel 124.
Welcome back to Real Clear Politics on Sirius XM. I'm Andrew Walworth, and I'm here with Tom Bevan and Phil Wegman. And gentleman JD Vance gave his first interview as Vice President of the United States on Saturday. He spoke with Margaret Brennan from CBS. Here's a little bit of what they talked about. This is Margaret Brennan asking the question.
You campaigned on lowering prices for consumers. We've seen all of these executive orders. Which one lowers prices?
We have done a lot, and there have been a number of executive orders that have caused already jobs to start coming back into our country, which is a core part of lowering prices. More capital investment, more job creation in our economy is one of the things that's going to drive down prices for all consumers, but also raise wages so that people can afford to buy the things that they need. If you look at our slate of executive orders, no, Margaret, prices are going to come down, but it's going to take a little bit of time, right? The president has been president for all of 5 days.
So, Tom, there was a lot of substance in that interview. It was almost 20 minutes long. So I'm not trying to misrepresent the full line of questioning, but what did you make of that particular line of questioning?
If only Carl were here to hear the rant I'm about to go on. First of all, why is JD Vance giving his first sit-down interview to Margaret Brennan of CBS News? That's a question that I saw a lot. I have it myself. I've often wondered, right? She was the one who moderated the VP debate and, acquitted herself not well in the opinion of many. And, she was fact-checking JD Vance in real time and all this stuff. I mean, it was just, so why? That's question number one. Number two, having said that, he sits down with her, what do you expect him to get? Well, exactly that kind of question, which is, absurd, right? Which executive order lowers prices? I mean, maybe she's not doesn't have a degree in economics, but like that's a crazy question to ask. And throughout the interview, the entire time, I mean, she was just incredibly aggressive, interrupting, crosstalk, over and over and over again. I thought he handled himself well. Just for once, I'd love one of these politicians. I would have loved JD Vance. When he got that question, he said, that is just a ridiculous question. Why would you ask that question? Or Trump does that sometimes with some of these interviewers. But man, this one actually stunned me a little bit. And I'm not easily stunned by the media.
Yeah, he Phil. So he defended Pete Hegseth. He called him a disruptor. He voiced confidence in Tulsi Gabbard. They did talk about other things, but you're a reporter. What did you make of the interview?
I don't know if you guys heard me, but I had written down in my line of questions for all Trump officials which magic wand the president would wave to do X, Y, and Z. And now, given that Tom signs the back of my paychecks, I'm gonna have to not ask.
Use that.
And I asked that one. Look, I think that there is something very substantial happening in this interview with Margaret Brennan. There was criticism of Vance for going on CBS News. For as much as this administration talks about hating the fake news, they run to them sometimes when they're looking to break news. But I think that with Vance, the vice president is in the middle of a rollout. He only has so many moments to cement himself as a member of this administration with perhaps an eye to 2028. And he was willing to go into the lion's den and have that combative interview, combative back and forth with corporate media to prove to the MAGA masses that, he's one of them, that his mettle has been tested and he has been shown not wanting. And so I think it was a significant moment because what do we see afterwards? Well, that interview is the #1 trending interview on YouTube 24 hours afterwards with something like 1.4 billion views. You have all of these, conservatives who are online making memes, praising Vance's handling of the question. And I think what we're seeing right now is, look, Donald Trump wanted an apprentice. He got a hillbilly apprentice in JD Vance, someone who, understands what Trump wants, but also is very much from the Midwest. He's, a son of Appalachia. And I think that he sort of nailed the assignment there. And so right now, what Vance is trying to do is he's trying to nail the rollout here, be part of this administration, lay his claim without overshadowing the current president. And I think he did exactly that. He got what he wanted out of that exchange because that is sort of atypical of the interviews that you have with some of these corporate media figures. There's a way to push these guys. There really is. But, sometimes it might require a little bit more economic literacy than asking if they have a magic wand.
Yeah. Well, Tom, he treaded on your ground a little bit because he did a little media criticism of his own. And so when I heard this, I thought of you. I wanted to play this clip for you and get your reaction.
Both the Wall Street Journal and the National Review, conservative publications, as you know, have been critical of Tulsi Gabbard. Does any of this give you pause putting her in charge of the U.S. intelligence community? Yes or no?
No, Margaret, look, these are publications that attacked Donald J. Trump obsessively, but those publications don't determine who the president is, the American people do. And Donald J. Trump is the person who determines who his cabinet is, not these publications that I think, frankly, have lost relevance.
So that's lost relevance, the Wall Street Journal and the National Review. What do you think?
Well, I think the substance of his point is correct. The media doesn't determine who he gets to choose, who Trump picks, or whether they should, receive confirmation or not. I think, look, I would defend the Wall Street Journal. I still go to the Wall Street Journal. I find great stuff there on the opinion page, even though the Journal does from time to time, they write, stuff that I'm sure offends MAGA world and sticks in Trump's craw. Their editorials in particular. National Review, I think, is one of those publications, though, that came out with the big glossy, why you must oppose Donald Trump in 2016. I think did it again in 2020 or something similar. And I think they are a publication that used to be the center of sort of the conservative ecosystem, media ecosystem, when William F. Buckley ran the place, and was relevant long after that. But they have lost relevance. I mean, there's just no question. National Review is not the publication that it used to be. Weekly Standard used to be the same thing. Now they're no longer in business. So I think he was more accurate in his description of National Review than he was with the Wall Street Journal. The Wall Street Journal is still, still going strong in terms of its influence. I think it might have waned a little bit, as all corporate media has, and I think that might have been the other piece of this that he was talking about. This campaign, we saw the rise of alternative media really sort of flexing its muscles, while some of the legacy and corporate media, their influence did wane in the 2024 election.
Phil, I was sort of struck by this, which is that I don't know who's doing Margaret Brennan's research, but the idea that you would have a gotcha question and say, National Review says this to someone from MAGA world, just, shows you really don't understand what's gone on in the conservative movement over the last decade.
I wonder if JD Vance was tempted to lean in and say, I already canceled my own damn subscription, as William F. Buckley once encouraged folks who did not appreciate the editorials of his magazine. But I think that there is a larger point here that we ought to explore a little bit. And I think Tom did a good job at that, which is there are no more gatekeepers anymore. There's no National Review, which is going to define what is and is not conservative orthodoxy. And I don't even think that the Wall Street Journal editorial board is capable of doing that job. Instead, what we're seeing is direct-to-consumer arguments from these principals, where they're going on podcasts and making their arguments not in 1,000 words, not in 5 to 10 minute snippets, but over the course of hours. We saw JD Vance do this with the Comfortably Smug podcast. We saw Donald Trump do this on Joe Rogan. I think that's significant because we're in this moment here where, once again, Republicans are trying to figure out what the party line is. And thus far, the thing that they can cling to is not an editorial by an outside organization, not a white paper from a think tank. Instead, it's whatever Donald Trump says orthodoxy is at that moment. And right now, as far as barometers go, he's got a better barometer of what the right in this country wants than anyone else. And I think that's pretty significant. So no, that sort of presenting Vance with a clipping from a magazine, that dog's just not going to hunt.
Yeah. Tom, were you surprised that she reached to play the National Review?
I think, yeah, absolutely. I mean, it does. It just shows sort of a lack of understanding of the current environment that we're in, the political environment. And look, this is part of the problem with corporate media. I mean, they live in a bubble, and they view the conservative. They view conservatives in MAGA world as like animals in a zoo through the glass.
Gorillas in the mist.
Yeah, exactly. And so that's what leads to this kind of stuff where it's the same thing. I mean, the same show. All of these Sunday shows, when they have their panel of folks at the end, it's like a liberal, a legacy media reporter, and the conservative that they have on is usually someone from the establishment or someone who's like an anti-Trump person. There's very rarely someone on there who represents what MAGA world actually thinks and believes. And that's been going on for years, and they never change, and they don't get it. And so in that sense, it's not surprising that Margaret Brennan or any of these hosts don't really have an idea of what the skinny is, what the actual truth is.
Well, this is why we miss Carl Cannon sometimes, because Carl would have something nice to say about the mainstream media just at this point in the podcast, but for the radio show. Anyway, we miss him. Anyway, hey, you're listening to Real Clear Politics on Sirius XM. I'm Andrew Walworth. I'm here with Tom Bevan, Phil Wegman. Don't go away. We'll be back in a second. And when we do, I'm going to talk to Peter Berkowitz about the Middle East.
This is Real Clear Politics on POTUS, Sirius XM Channel 124.
Honest reporting and an authentic picture of public disclosure. This is Real Clear Politics on POTUS, Sirius XM 124.
Welcome back to Real Clear Politics on Sirius XM. I'm Andrew Walworth, and our next guest is Peter Berkowitz. He's a senior fellow at the Hoover Institution at Stanford University, and from 2019 to 21, he served as director of the policy planning staff at the U.S. State Department. Peter, welcome back to the program.
Good to be with you. Thank you.
So, you know, you and I often talk about the Middle East on this program. There's always seemed to be something new to discuss. And I wanted to have you on today in particular to talk about what happened over the weekend, because on Saturday, President Trump told reporters that he'd like to see Palestinians, quote, vacate Gaza. He said, I'd like Egypt to take people and I'd like Jordan to take people. It's a huge departure for U.S. policy. What's the effect of it? And is this a serious proposal?
Well, first it has to be said that Trump's suggestion is responding to a real dilemma. Much of the Gaza Strip has been reduced to rubble. In my opinion, that's because of the decision of Hamas to conduct warfare from inside city zones. Nevertheless, it's been reduced to rubble, and Gaza is going to need an immense cleaning up in the coming months just to begin the reconstruction, moving massive amounts of destroyed cement and steel and more. And people need to be taken care of. And we should say, if we look at something comparable, the war in Ukraine, Poland, for example, has taken in millions of Ukrainians who are, these Ukrainians are refugees right now. They have jobs, they have places to stay. Who in the Arab world has taken in Palestinians? Something like 100,000 Palestinians found their way to Egypt. So we do have a refugee problem, a refugee crisis. However, having said all that, here are two problems with President Trump's suggestion that Egypt and Jordan should take in millions of Palestinians. One problem, the Jordanians are adamantly opposed. Second problem, the Egyptians are adamantly opposed. There are more problems, but those are the two problems we could begin with. It's extraordinarily unlikely that millions, hundreds of thousands, tens of thousands of Palestinians will be transported to either one of those states.
But you know, we've seen this movie before, or we're seeing this movie, I guess. He says something about Greenland and people think, oh, that's crazy. And now, well, you know, there's serious thoughts about the future of Greenland. He does have this ability to sort of put an idea out there which seems outrageous. And it's either an opening gambit, as you know, some of us suggested, or, you know, the world seems to come into his way of thinking a little bit.
There's something to that. And in fact, in a short time, I hope to write an RCP column about this and say, this may not be happen, but Trump's suggestion may make possible the following idea. I call it the Sinai option. What is the Sinai option? Well, there's a huge desert, Egyptian desert, located right next to the Gaza Strip. It's mostly empty. Suppose Egypt were persuaded not to give any land, but to make available, let's say, 10 or 15 square miles right next to the Gaza Strip. And you could build a fence around it and you say, anybody who comes to live here, they're not going to become Egyptian citizens. It's temporary. We're not going to say for how long. But suppose the international community, led by the United States, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Jordan, other moderate Arab countries, began building hospitals, apartment buildings, infrastructures for city. It's right on the border I'm talking about, 10, 15 square miles with Gaza. No transfer of people. Transfer is forbidden under international law. But you make available buses. And you say to some of the 2.3 million Palestinians living in the Gaza Strip, while we're cleaning up Gaza, look, there's some new apartment buildings here. All you have to do is get aboard this bus and travel half a mile, a few miles. It's not a border. We're opening up areas. You don't become Egyptian citizens. You don't get Egyptian benefits. But your land is extended, and we're building here where you don't encounter rubble. maybe Trump's grand suggestion, which the Egyptians and Jordanians have already rejected and are likely to continue to reject, could lead to a compromise whereby the Sinai option were embraced.
You know, I mean, that's interesting. I guess it could happen. It may be sort of what Trump has in mind, because he did say he's got that real estate developer view, like, oh God, look, we get these people out of here, we'll rebuild this, it's going to look like Miami Beach, But I did want to ask you about the peace process generally. It's we're in this first phase, which I believe is 42 days. How do you think it's going, and what do you think is going to happen next?
By the way, I will answer that question, but I just want to make clear, I didn't want to suggest that the Sinai option is likely to happen, only that Trump's grand plan might have created an opening for ideas like that. How do I think it's going? I think it's both, it's an awful process, compromise, ceasefire, which maybe is the best the Israelis could have hoped for. The country is overjoyed to have welcomed home. I think it's now 8 of those who have been abducted. There remain approximately 90 living and dead who are still held by Hamas. The country remains in great tension as it waits for the next round of people kidnapped. And we should emphasize manifest violation of the international laws of war. The International Red Cross has never visited these people. In fact, most of the abductees are not soldiers. They are civilians. So far, the ceasefire has more or less held. There have been glitches. The Israelis have accused the Palestinians of violations here and there, but we remain in the early phase. And so far, the Israelis have maintained a ceasefire. Hamas has released, as I said, 8. Another third round is soon to happen. And Israel has, meantime, released hundreds of hardened criminals, people who are being held properly because they were making war against Israel, have on their hands the blood of Israeli civilians. So it's still an excruciating moment for Israel. The joy in welcoming home the abductees, and the pain of releasing prisoners of whom they know some of them will go back to the fight against Israel.
Yeah. Well, you're listening to Real Clear Politics on Sirius XM. I'm Andrew Walworth. I'm here with Peter Berkowitz. And Peter, I'm going to break one of the rules I was taught about journalism. I want to talk about process a little bit, but we have some wonks in the audience, so they'll enjoy this. The rest of you may have to forgive me. But Peter ran the policy planning staff at the U.S. State Department, which, as Peter has explained it to me, it's sort of a think tank within the Secretary's office. And I'm just wondering, Peter, when you have someone like Donald Trump as your ultimate boss, and you were there, and you're a thoughtful guy. I mean, people who listen to this program hear you. I mean, you couldn't ask for, a sort of more measured and nuanced view of the world. But how does having Donald Trump at the head of things make your life, or the person who has your job now, difficult or easy?
Well, I would say, first of all, that whatever challenges President Trump creates in the State Department, they're mostly for the Secretary of State. The job of the head of the policy planning involves a couple of tasks. The largest task, I suppose, is to help the Secretary of State think through, crystallize, make precise the nation's strategic objectives in diplomacy. The second task, big task, is to help the Secretary of State make sure that various lines of effort and various bureaus throughout the State Department are well aligned with the strategic objectives. The policy planning also usually helps drafts the Secretary's speeches. Now, of course, what happened over the weekend is somewhat unusual. The president threw a curveball, made a suggestion that is, first of all, in dramatic conflict with the previous administration, but as far as I know, has not been raised even by Republican friends of Israel, that more than 1 million Palestinians be transferred to Egypt and Jordan, even temporarily. So I would say that the Secretary today, since Saturday night, my guess is that the Secretary of State and his closest senior advisors, including the head of policy planning, a guy named Mike Anton, are scrambling to figure out what this means, how to reconcile it. Of course, not with the Biden administration, but their own developing ideas about how to deal with Israel's war against, the war that Iran has undertaken against Israel, where Hamas, Gaza Strip is one front. But I'm confident also that this team understands that at the end of the day, they serve President Trump, and it's their job to help him, as I said before, as policy plan staff does with the Secretary of State, refine his strategic objectives and develop lines of effort to implement them.
Hey, Peter, we're going to have to leave it there. I really appreciate getting your insight. It's Peter Berkowitz. He's the senior fellow at the Hoover Institution at Stanford, and he's served as director of policy planning staff from 2019 to 2021, which is why we ask him process questions as well as substantive questions. Anyway, you're listening to Real Clear Politics on Sirius XM. I'm Andrew Walworth. That's our program. Have a great evening.
This is Real Clear Politics on POTUS, Sirius XM Channel 124.